My aunt stole my fiance for her daughter, but now they're crying. Turns out he's a bum. I never thought I'd be in a situation like this. I mean, betrayal always feels like something that happens to someone else, not you. But here I am, 28 years old, thinking I had my life figured out, only to have it turned upside down by two people I trusted, my aunt and my cousin. It's a story that sounds like something straight out of a soap opera, but trust me, this one's real. Let me start from the beginning. I was engaged to Ron, who's 27. We'd been together for about 4 years, having met in college. We weren't super close back then, but we reconnected after graduation, and things moved pretty fast after that. Ron was charming, smart, and at the time, I thought he was my perfect match. Last year, he proposed, and I said yes. We had a small engagement party, just close family and friends, and that's where things started to go wrong, though I didn't realize it at the time. My aunt, who had never really been that affectionate toward me, suddenly seemed very interested in Ron. She kept praising how handsome and wealthy he was. It was strange because she had always been distant and critical of me, especially when it came to her daughter, Lucia. Now, Lucia is 4 years younger than me, and honestly, she's stunning. But she's also, to put it nicely, not the sharpest tool in the shed. Growing up, my aunt constantly compared us. Even when Lucia was still in middle school, my aunt would say things like, "Lucia's better at school than you. Just wait and see." That was laughable because Lucia struggled to pass high school while I was excelling. But still, the comparisons never stopped. After the engagement party, my aunt's interest in Ron only grew. She started calling more often, showing up at our family gatherings when she normally wouldn't have bothered. I didn't think much of it at the time. She was family, after all. But then, I noticed how she was always trying to get Ron and Lucia to talk. "Oh, Ron, why don't you help Lucia with her resume? She could really use someone as smart as you." Or, "Lucia loves the same movies you do, Ron. You two should watch one together sometime." Little comments like that kept happening, but I trusted Ron, so I brushed it off. Everything seemed to be going well as Ron and I were planning our wedding. We set a date for October, but before that, I had the opportunity to go to the UK for a summer program related to my career. It was a great chance for me to learn and grow, and Ron seemed supportive at least at first. I left for the program in June, thinking we'd stay close through calls and messages. For the first couple of weeks, everything was fine. We talked once a day, even with the time difference. But soon, things started to change. Ron became distant. Our daily calls turned into short, awkward conversations. When I asked him if something was wrong, he just mumbled something about being stressed at work. I figured the distance was putting a strain on us, but I didn't think much of it because we'd been together for years. I thought we were strong enough to handle it. Then, about a week before my program ended, he stopped talking to me altogether. No calls, no messages, nothing. I was devastated and confused. I wondered if I had done something wrong, or if the distance had really caused him to lose interest in me. But I told myself that once I got back, we'd work it out. After all, we were engaged. We were supposed to be planning a future together. But that future crumbled in an instant when my aunt showed up at my house with a wedding invitation in hand. She stood there, smiling smugly, and handed me the invite. "Ron and Lucia are getting married next month," she said with this fake sympathy in her voice. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. My fiance was marrying my cousin? I was in complete shock. My aunt wasted no time in rubbing it in. She said, "I know this must be hard for you, dear, but sometimes people fall out of love. You can't blame Ron. He just couldn't handle the distance. And you know how beautiful Lucia is. It was only natural that he'd be drawn to her." I sat there, speechless, as she went on and on about how Ron and Lucia had grown close while I was away. She even had the nerve to tell me that Ron had come to their house, gotten down on one knee, and asked for Lucia's hand in marriage like some kind of fairy tale prince. My heart was shattered, but I was too stunned to even argue. I just wanted her out of my house. Before she left, she threw one last insult my way. "Don't be discouraged, dear. I know it might be hard for you to find another man at your age and with your looks, but there are plenty of divorced men out there looking for a second chance." I was so furious I could barely see straight. I kicked her out and slammed the door behind her. For a long time, I felt like a complete fool. Everyone in our family and all my friends knew that Ron and I had been engaged, and now he was marrying Lucia. It was humiliating. And to make things worse, my aunt started spreading rumors that Ron had left me because I was too focused on my career. She even claimed that he thought I was cheating on him while I was in the UK. None of it was true, of course, but people love drama, and soon enough, everyone believed her version of the story. I went through a really dark period after that. I was heartbroken, embarrassed, and angry. I moved out of the city and got a job in the UK, hoping that a change of scenery would help me move on. And it did. Slowly but surely, I started to heal. I focused on my career and rebuilding my life. Then, a few months ago, my mom called me with some interesting news. She said my aunt had come to her house, absolutely livid, screaming, "Why didn't you tell me Ron was a bum?" My mom was confused, so my aunt explained that Ron had quit his job over a year ago to pursue his passion for writing. Apparently, Lucia had no idea that he wasn't bringing in any money and now had to get a better job to support them both. It turns out that while Ron and I were together, I was the one supporting him financially so he could chase his dream of being a writer. We had an agreement that I would work full-time while he wrote, and eventually, we'd both run a business together. But after he left me for Lucia, he was no longer my problem. My aunt, who thought she was marrying her daughter off to some rich, charming guy, got a rude awakening. Now, she's stuck with a son-in-law who can't even pay the bills. And I couldn't help but laugh when I heard the news. Karma, it seems, has a funny way of working things out. While I was devastated at first, I've realized that losing Ron was the best thing that could have happened to me. I dodged a bullet, and now I'm thriving in my new life. As for my aunt and cousin, well, let's just say they're not living the fairy tale they thought they would. He had this grand plan to run away with Lucia, but Lucia had no idea about the truth. My aunt had orchestrated everything, marrying them off so they could live off her income. My aunt always knew how to manipulate people for her own benefit, and Ron was no exception. She thought Lucia, being young and pretty, would be their ticket to an easy life. But the joke's on them. Last I heard, Lucia is working part-time as a receptionist at a small restaurant, making table reservations. How my aunt and Ron expect to live off a receptionist's salary, I have no idea. I mean, it's almost laughable. I don't care if it sounds harsh, but I would absolutely love to see the look of disappointment on my aunt's face when she realizes her big plan has gone up in smoke. There's even more history here. My aunt wasn't just some random person in Lucia's life. She was actually her dad's mistress. After he passed away, his legal wife rightfully kicked my aunt and Lucia out of the house. They had nowhere to go, so they moved in with my grandparents. For years, they lived off my grandparents' pension. Occasionally, my dad and uncle would chip in to help them out financially, but that only fueled my aunt's entitlement. She's never worked a day in her life, always expecting others to take care of her. Lucia grew up in that environment, which explains a lot. She's always been a bit clueless and lazy, never willing to work or put in the effort. She failed high school twice, before finally giving up and dropping out altogether. And now, she's stuck working as a receptionist, a job she only got because my uncle pulled some strings with a friend who owns a restaurant. Even a receptionist job requires a high school diploma these days. But that's the level Lucia's operating at. Still, if you think karma's done its job, you'd be wrong. After I finished grieving, I decided it was time to act. Ron was still working at his jobs when all this was happening. Together, we had set up a trust fund that we planned to use for a business venture down the line. Since I handled all of our finances, I had full access to that fund. I was diligent about putting money into it every month, while Ron contributed sporadically. I would say about 20% of the money in that trust fund was his, but the majority was mine. When I discovered his affair, I liquidated the entire thing. He has no clue that the fund is gone. In his delusional mind, he still believes the money is waiting for him. He even told Lucia that once my anger subsided, he would contact me, and I'd give him his 50%. I can't wait for the moment when he realizes that money no longer exists. If you're thinking that makes me a scammer, you're wrong. I supported Ron through thick and thin. When he quit his full-time jobs to pursue writing, he struggled for months to find stable work. It was hard for him to make ends meet. So I opened one of my personal accounts and allowed him to use it for his monthly expenses. I wasn't just a girlfriend, I was his financial safety net. I helped him in every way I could, making sure he never went without, even when times were tough. I think what I did is more than fair. If we had been married, he could have filed for alimony. The trust fund was the closest equivalent, since we were almost engaged. So yes, I liquidated it. And now he has no savings, no job, and no plan. But that's no longer my problem. This past Christmas was the icing on the cake. I finally got the satisfaction of seeing Ron's face when he showed up at my mother's house, looking for me. He came knocking on my door, demanding his share of the trust fund. "Where's my money?" he asked, frustration clear in his voice. I played dumb. "What money?" I replied. He explained. "The money we saved in the trust fund for our business. I need my 50%. I looked him dead in the eye and said, "Oh, that money? I liquidated the entire thing." He lost it. "How could you do that? We saved that money for our business. What are we supposed to do now?" I smirked and said, "There's no we. You're not my partner anymore, Ron. You're my cousin's husband now. The only person you should be discussing this with is across the street, Lucia." He took a deep breath, trying to keep his cool. "Look, I know I messed up. I know I hurt you, and you have every right to be mad. But I really need that money. I lost my job. The client I was writing for dropped me, and Lucia doesn't make enough to support both of us. I haven't paid rent in 2 months, and the landlord is threatening to evict us. Please, just try to understand." I wasn't having it. "Why should I understand anything after what you did to me? You cheated on me, and now you expect me to help you?" Ron, desperately trying to hold on to some kind of leverage, said, "It's not just your money. I own 20% of that trust fund, and I want it back." I crossed my arms and said, "Remember the money I gave you for your monthly expenses when you were struggling? I took your 20% from the trust fund to recover some of that. So no, you're not getting anything." He stood there, stunned for a moment before saying, "I spent that money as your boyfriend. You can't claim it back." Without missing a beat, I replied, "Well, by that logic, you gave me your part of the trust fund when you were my boyfriend, so you shouldn't ask for it back either." He threatened to sue me, but I wasn't fazed. I told him if he tried that, I would press charges for card theft since he had used my debit card without permission multiple times. If we really start calculating who owes who, Ron, You'll be in debt, so you'd better think carefully." He left furious, his face a mixture of anger and defeat. As if that wasn't enough drama, my aunt and Lucia showed up at my parents' house the next day. They were there to ask about the trust fund money, claiming Ron told them I'd taken his share. I told them it was none of their business and refused to discuss it further. Lucia, desperate, said that her future was at stake. "You need to tell me," she insisted. I shot back. "This is way beyond what you can understand, Lucia, so stay out of it." My aunt, always quick to defend her daughter, started yelling at me, saying I should lower my ego because Lucia was more successful than I was after all. Ron had chosen her over me. At that point, my dad came in, hearing the commotion. He told my aunt that if she ever raised her voice at me again, he would cut off the financial help he had been giving her all these years. And then the truth came out. My aunt and Lucia had no idea that Ron was 2 months behind on rent, barely able to support them. When they found out, Lucia broke down, sobbing. "Ron has ruined my life," she cried. "We'll be homeless if we don't get that money." My dad laughed and said, "If Lucia is so successful, then maybe she should help Ron manage the house instead of coming here to beg for money." Before they left, I couldn't resist one final jab. "Don't worry, Lucia. There are plenty of sugar daddies out there for girls like you." It was mean, but after everything they put me through, I didn't care anymore. They had humiliated me, betrayed me, and now they wanted my help. I don't think so. Now, they're stuck with the consequences of their actions, and I'm finally free. Ron emailed me, confessing how badly things had gone for him. He borrowed money from a friend to cover the rent, but missed another payment because his client delayed paying him for his writing work. The landlord gave him a notice to leave the house. He asked my aunt if they could stay with her for a while, but my grandparents said no. What Ron didn't know was that my aunt doesn't own the house my grandparents do. They lied and said it was hers. Turns out, they're all a bunch of liars. Ron also found out Lucia lied about her education and job. She pretended to be a restaurant manager and exaggerated her salary. This made Ron think they could follow our business plan together. Honestly, I'm shocked he didn't see how clueless she was on their dates. Did they even talk? Or were their meetups just for fun? He said he's giving up on his dream of writing and is now looking for a job in his old field. I ignored his first email. A few days later, he sent another one, apologizing again. He admitted to betraying me and said his life is falling apart. He mentioned how my aunt and Lucia tricked him. It's funny how even smart people can fall for a pretty face. But I have no desire to forgive Ron. He cheated, and to me, once a cheater, always a cheater. He might be suffering because I liquidated the trust fund, but I don't regret it. He made his choices, and now he has to deal with the consequences. I replied to his email, told him never to contact me again, and then blocked him. Part of me wanted to warn him that my aunt would probably dump him and Lucia as soon as she found someone richer. But why should I? He broke my heart by cheating with my own cousin. His misery is just gossip to me now. I shared everything with my mom, and we had a good laugh. She said it was satisfying to see karma doing its work. Life is good. So much better than when I first started writing here. It's been 2 years since everything exploded, and the difference between my life and theirs is huge. Let me start with a quick update on me, since some of you asked. I still have my job in Leeds, and everything's going great. I've even met someone, and we're dating now. As for Ron, he got a job, but according to mutual friends, he's miserable. He's constantly whining about how he lost his dream job, and now has to do something he hates, and apparently, he blames me for it. He even called me a witch. But honestly, I'm pretty happy about how things turned out for him. If he really cared about his dream job, he could have worked harder to make it happen, but clearly he wasn't that dedicated. Now for the best part. My grandparents kicked out my aunt and Lucia. They got sick of all the drama and told them to leave. Now those two are renting a place together because they don't really have any other options. If I were them, I'd start looking for new boyfriends fast, because Lucia isn't getting any younger or smarter. Yes, I know I'm being mean, but hey, that's karma for you.